Hi, welcome back. In our last session, we learned how we could include a credit card payment gateway as well as a crypto payment gateway. In our last lecture today, in this particular part, and then we have another one for wrapping up. But at least for today, we are going to learn one of the probably most important feature um, of calligraphy. Okay, so far in calligraphy, we learned how we could create a model, a view, a controller, and through the views, we were able to create forms, to create pages, and to create a user interface in order for us to be able to interact with the database. Okay, now interacting with the database doesn't always have to go through a graphical user interface. And most importantly, specifically if you want to distribute and you want your code to be usable by other applications that could access these great features that you would include in your application, you might probably want them to be available for certain third-party applications to build upon these features or maybe use your services. This is the whole concept of what we call an API. An API is a way, it's a protocol, it's an HTTP protocol that happens between two applications where these applications can send to each other or can help each other integrate to the services and to interact with the database of a particular application. In other words, in our mini showcase application, you probably want a third-party application developed by a completely different developer, okay, to have access to your list of projects, for example, or even to be able to add a project, to post to your list, to make changes to your list of projects, and things like that. Okay, but you want that third application that is done by somebody completely maybe anonymous as well to do those as opposed to you doing it in your own application. In order for this to happen, that's when an API comes into play. Okay, what that third party developer needs to do, they need to have an API access to your application and to be able to use it. Okay, and that API access can very much be driven by the same credentials, username and password that your application has, and this is exactly how we're going to see it today. From the moment somebody registers to our showcase application, then we could immediately give them access to an API. And Calligraphy does this beautifully because it considers that every application that you create always has an API access to it, and it comes by default. Great. So now how can we test the APIs? All right, and there are multiple ways to do this. If you are familiar with some shell application commands such as HTTP if you're using Linux, for instance, or even a PC product, or curl if you're using a Mac, or you can use the terminal in order for you to test out these APIs. So that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is to actually write code that would send the request in a form with all the appropriate inputs in a form of an API packed way. So that's another way. And the third way is to use an application. So, and I will tell you the name of the application that we're going to use. And that application, what it's going to do, it's going to mimic the browser, but in fact what you're doing is you're calling requests to the application, whether it's a get request or a put request or a post request, and it's sending all the appropriate attributes or properties or even inputs that the code needs. Okay, the application that we're going to use today. So if I go to the lecture, I go to REST APIs. And by the way, APIs, there are different types. The one we're concerned with is called the RESTful APIs, which really mimics HTTP method requests. That's really the beauty of it, and it fundamentally uses the get, the post, the put, and the delete. Okay, so that's really what a RESTful API is. So in order obviously to be able to do this in a more interesting way, there is an application called Postman. You can go to the URL that is given to you in here in the lecture, and then you can download Postman, and then I will show you how we use Postman throughout the application. One thing that I want you to look at is when you go to the web.php, on the very top you will notice something called auth activate API. By default, this is activated for you. If you do not want to give API access, then you would need to comment this out, and then the API access would be completely blocked. Okay, so for as long as this is activated, then the API access is also active. Okay, so one way to completely block it for everybody is to not activate it. Great. Now that we have this, let's go to Postman. All right, I will delete all this because we're going to start fresh. Okay, here's what Postman is. Postman, it does look like a browser and it has an address. Okay, but the difference is you will never see an HTML output, or actually you could see an HTML output if you want, but the reality is you're going to see a JSON output, and a JSON is really the fundamental format of a file that is quite standard in the industry, and that probably every API out there uses. Okay, the JSON format, the output will always be formatted as a JSON, and this is how other parties are going to consume it. Okay, they will take the JSON and then they do something with it. So the output that needs to come out of this is out of our server and out of the Caligraphy server is always a JSON, because it is the most distributed the file format that can be distributed very widely, because it's widely used. Now if you look at the address over here, the beauty of something like Postman is you can choose what sort of HTTP method you want to send the request as, and we have the get, the post, the put, and the delete. Okay, there are many others. If you remember well, at some point we talked about this, but Caligraphy only supports get, post, put, and delete. Okay, which are really the most used ones across the board. All right, so now with this, I will show you how we could use Postman in order to do all the CRUD functionalities that we created with Showcase. Okay, the very basic one is, let's go to getting all our posters, which is a public function or a public URI that we did, which is localhost/showcase, like that. And this, when I do a get on localhost/showcase, I would want all of my project to be returned. Now, there is something else that we need to do specifically when we're using Postman. What we want to do is we want to send in the headers of this request. So the request has headers, it has a body, it has some other parameters as well. Okay, in the header, what we want to send something there are two elements that we need to send. We need to say that the header needs to accept application/JSON, because we want to send it as a JSON, and the content type that we want to send is also application/JSON in this particular case. Okay, what we need to tell it is it's just a way for Caligraphy to know that this request is being sent as a JSON. All right, and I'm gonna hit send, and look what we just got. Now this is not readable at all, but if I do it in a JSON format, look what we got. We got an array of projects, and these are exactly our 3 projects that are currently there. Okay, and what else do we have? We have the metadata as well that we sent to our view. So basically what our what Postman is gonna get, if I go back to my controller over here, it's gonna get everything that I am sending to the views. And I am sending a list of all the projects, I am sending the metadata, and I'm sending a flag called social true. And that is exactly what my Postman is gonna receive in a JSON format. You just did a get an API HTTP request to get all the projects. That means with this, you are kind of mimicking how a third-party developer would see whenever they ask for or they do a request on your server. They are going to get this. And once they get this, they could use it, they could turn it into an array and consume it in their own application. This was our first. This is our get. Great. Now, our immediate next step is to access the login pages. So now what I'm going to do maybe is I'm going to create a collection and I'm going to call it Calligraphy course. Okay, what that collection is, it helps us save these in case we want to get back to them. So what I'm going to say save as, and this is going to be list of all projects. And I'm going to save it under Calligraphy course. Okay, and if I open it, nope, Calligraphy course, here we go. This is our list of projects. So now I can delete it. Great. Now let's do something else. We need to log in order to be able to have access to the editable forms or to the delete or to the add. Okay, so I need to provide an API access, which we already do because it's a route in our world, and I'll get back to that point at some point. And I'm gonna do a post. Okay, I'm gonna do a post on what route exactly. I'm gonna do it on showcase login, which is one of the routes that authentication gave us when we integrated the authentication module that is given by Calligraphy. Great. Over here, we're going to do the same thing. The content type is also application JSON, and then it accepts application JSON. So far, so good. But I do want to send a username and a password. If I don't send a username and a password, then I cannot log in. And let me try. If I do this, I'm going to get garbage. Okay, it's an error or what have you. It's nothing. So what I need to do is in the body, I need to say I want to send raw JSON. Over here, I'm going to say username, and it's going to be test1. Well, let's try wrong one first, okay, to fail it. And then we're going to, the other attribute is called passcode. And I'm going to say the passcode is 1234, I believe that was. Now, test doesn't exist, but I'm still going to send it just to show you what the output would be. Look at the beauty of the output. You get error, true, status danger, message header, whoops, something is not right, and message invalid credentials, which again is exactly what we send whenever we go to page controller. Where is it? The login. Sorry. Not the page controller, but the login that is under authentication. Here we go. This is what we get. Okay, this is what Calligraphy gave us, and that's what we get in our output. Now let's do test 1. When I do test 1, let's go back to project controller in order to understand what is really happening after we log in. So after we log in, if you remember, you are going to be redirected to index. So ideally what we're going to see, the list of projects if we succeeded and if the login succeeds. So let's do send. Here we go. I get the list of projects again. All right. So now I succeeded. Now I am into the application, and what Postman does, it is going to save that in a session. So now this session knows that I am logged in. Okay. So let's save that login. I'm going to do save. I'm going to call it successful login. We add it to calligraphy course. Now I have it here. Great. Now we need to add a logout. The logout is a simple get, and it's logout. Now I don't need to send the body. It's none. I'm going to delete it. I still need my headers though. So now I'm going to do logout. And it takes me again back to the index, which is a public page. So I see my public pages. I'm going to save it as logout. Why? Because we might use it later. Okay, now let's go back and log in again, because now we're going to use the edit functions. Now I am logged in. Okay, and I use test1. So my login is in this session. Let's now create, and I'll delete these, a new one. So I need to do a post, and it's going to be on localhost showcase. If you remember well, it was called /new. The header, even if we're repeating, it's okay because it will give you more practice. Okay, application /json, and then content type also is application /json. Great. Now my post is a form, and I'm going to go back to the form a little bit, to the pug form that we created, and I'll tell you in a while exactly why we're going there. If I go to add, if you notice, I talked at some point about the encryption type being a multi-part form data. Why? Because it has an image or it has files that need to be uploaded. Okay, so this encryption type is exactly what the postman needs. So what we need to do here is in the body, it's a form data in this particular case. Why? Because we need files. And from the moment we need files, we cannot just simply send it as a JSON. It will not work, not for calligraphy at least. So now I need to add all the different attributes that we add every time we add a project. So we have a title, if you remember. We have a short description. They don't need to be in order, by the way. We have a category. We have a description. And we have image URL, which is our file. Now over here, all of these are text. And if you notice, there's a drop down over here. I can say file. Okay, so now I can fill it in just like the browse button, and I go search for my files and so on and so forth. We'll do it immediately. So let's do a title postman. Actually, I'm going to do one that has a number, because if you remember, at some point we made sure to validate that our title does not contain any numerics, and it's only alpha and no spaces, no special characters at all. So I'm going to do test2, and ideally this should return an error. And I'm going to do, this is a postman test. Category, we're going to call it test. Description, sent from postman. I'm going to pick a file, an image, and I'm going to do our famous Great Gatsby image. Now this is not going to work because we have test2, so ideally it should tell me that my input is not correct. So let's send it. Here we go. Error true, danger, message header, whoops, something is wrong. Some of the inputs are not valid. The title field may only contain letters. And we got it. Okay, now let's put postman. Ideally, this should add something to our database. Okay, and if you remember, after you add, what we did in project controller, if I go back to it, it redirects me to, let's go to add. Once it's done, if everything succeeds, it's going to go to our home. So I'm going to see the list of my projects again if this succeeds. So let's send it. All right, I see the list. This is good news. Question is, do we have an item here that says postman? Here it is. Let me go and check it here. Ideally, it should appear somewhere over here and should say postman. Here we go. We just added an item in our library. How awesome is that? Let's go back now to postman. And let's save this as new project. Great. We are still missing 2. Now we need to do an edit and we need to do a delete. Great. Let's go with the edit. The edit is a put. Our edit is a put. Localhost / showcase / we need an ID, and I remember the ID that we just created is ID 13, and it should be an edit, right? Okay. This is our put. Our header, except, since in this case, we do, if you remember well, our edit does not allow you to change the files. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the values, but we're going to change them using a JSON this time. Okay, and we're going to discover something very interesting here. So it's going to accept application /JSON, and then over here it is going to say content type, same thing, application /JSON. And what we said we're going to send in the body, we're going to send raw JSON. And let's, since we're doing an edit, let's go ahead and change the title. How about that? So title, and what we're going to be sent something that works. Okay, so it's not going to be a number. Let's say changed, like that. All right. Now before I hit send, because it's not gonna, well, actually it might work, but we wanna fix it before we do that. Let's go to project controller and see what we did when we're updating a project. Okay, what does it do? To update the project, it goes and finds it, and then it redirects to the home. Okay, great. Let's see. Where is our postman? Here is our postman. Are we ready? Error. The short description field is required. Some of the inputs are invalid. And I wanted to show you this very, very precisely, because in many cases, when you're trying, the APIs themselves are excellent for you to test out whether the code behaves the way you want. Over here in the update, what we did last time, and that was an overlook from my side, is that when we're updating a project and we're testing in the validation, we are saying that title is required, that short description must be required, and that category is required, and the description is required. But this is no longer true because I am updating. And when I'm updating, people can update any value that they want. So everywhere where I have required, I should get rid of it, because it is not true that it's required. It's no longer required, and I don't need to validate this. Okay, and for short description, I'm going to get rid of required because it's not true that it's required now. Same thing for the title. None of these are required. And I'm not worried because anyways, I'm always getting, if none of these are found, I'm taking what the value from the database is. And it won't be changed. Now you're going to tell me, but how come we didn't detect this before? Because if you remember in our form, and I'll take you to our form over here, I will need to sign in because this is a different session. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I hit this. In our form, automatically our form is pre-populating the values. So when I'm clicking on save, it is actually taking these values again, which are the previous values. Now when we're doing it through Postman, Postman doesn't know what the previous values are because there is no form, there is nothing. Okay, so this is the beauty of the APIs. It's always a great way for you to test out the underlying code. Sometimes when you create the graphical user interface, there is some logic that is added at the UI side, on the client side, and that logic is actually making sure that certain things are not happening, and it's actually hiding what the backend is doing, which has its benefits, but it also has some repercussions. And this is an example where we could not see this until we tried and we try to access it with an API. So now ideally if I do send, it should work. Here we go. I see an output. Okay, so ideally, now if we go back here, it's going to refresh. I need to see changed. We just changed using an API. Great. Let's save it. This was our editing a project. Now, are you ready to delete? Let's delete. And in order to delete, we're going to first close this entirely. And it is going to be a delete request. Where did we do the delete request? If you're following me closely, it needs to be an ID, and we did the delete request on the edit. Now you might be asking, but where am I getting all these? These are nothing more but the routes that are defined in web.php. Okay, this is our delete route. This is our put route. This is our get. Well, we didn't do this yet, but this is our post route. Okay, this is exactly where we're getting them from, and they should be exactly the same. So our delete is done on this URI, and same thing, we need to say accept application/JSON, and then content type application/JSON. And let's do it. I got my list back because exactly that's what happens. We are redirecting to the list as well. And ideally now if I refresh, it should be gone. Goodbye. All right. How awesome is that? I love it. I feel like it looks like magic to me. Okay, so let's say this is delete a project. Now we have them all. We just created all the CRUD functionalities directly in here. Now, let me point out something that is of extreme importance. I'm going to log out. And I send. Now I'm logged out, ideally. If ideally I'm logged out, then if I do this for new, it should not work. Do you agree? Because I'm logged out. Right? So it did work. Let me try to edit. Yes, indeed. I could not find the project for you. This is correct. There is no project. So let me try and edit an existing one. What would be an existing one? We deleted the other one. So let's go get this one. What is the ID of this one? It's 2. Okay, we're going to say 2 now. What are we changing it to? Changed. Now ideally this one should not work either. But it looks like it did work. And the big question is, why? And I will explain all that to you very soon. It did change it, even though we are logged out. Here's what's happening. And this is again why making sure that each and every route that is in your web.php, test it out with an API. Okay? Because if you do have authentication, then you got to make sure that there are no loopholes in your routes. This was an example of a loophole where I was able to go to access a route that was not protected. In reality, all of our routes are not protected right now. The only one that's protected is the showcase form, which is called, if I go back to web.php, let's go get which route calls change form. Showcase form is this one. This is the only one that is protected. all the others are open, and there is no mechanism for testing whether somebody is authorized to do them or not. So how can we add a guard to these controllers? Let's go back to our project controller, and if you remember our guard function that we talked about, this is exactly how we're going to do it. We're going to say guard, the name of the column is called permission, I guess not permissions. Let's go check. Actually, we could check it in the model. So let's go to the model, user model over here. It's permissions with an S. Okay, and the value, let's put it as 0, because what guard is going to check, it's going to check two things if you remember. The first thing that it's going to check is whether the user is logged in or not. The second thing is it's going to check the permissions. So what we're going to say is for any permission, meaning above 0, any permission above 0, we are going to allow it to go in. Otherwise, we're going to send it back to home for the time being. Okay. In an ideal world, you would send it to another page with another view that says you have no right to do this. But for the time being, let's leave it in here. And what's going to happen now? I'm going to copy this guard everywhere. And copy it here, here, and here, and one more, I guess, to delete. Now let's go back to our postman, and ideally this should take me back to the index. So I'm going to see the list of project, same thing, but nothing's going to happen in my nothing is going to happen in the actual database. So let me make sure I'm logged out again. Let me make sure I log in. Okay, I will log out. Now our logout is no longer working. I will check that, okay? Where is the logout? Let's check it together, because the logout might be taking us to one of these pages over here, and then there's a guard, and you're no longer allowed, and it's an infinite loop. Okay. Actually, index doesn't need a guard for now. Let's not put a guard here. Let's try that again. All right, now it worked. Okay, so let me just go back here. Index doesn't need a guard because it's a public page. Okay, this is our home. I apologize. I didn't pay attention. All right, so now let's go back to Postman and make sure I'm logged out again. Yes, we are logged out. Now let me try to do a new or an edit on one that already exists. We said 2 exists, great. And I'm gonna try to change it as no. Okay, and I'm gonna send. All right, it took me back to index, which is exactly what we want, but I hope that this did not change to no. And it did not change to no. So basically, it did not happen. You see how that guard allowed us to completely block certain actions from happening. And this is exactly the beauty of an API. API always think about the routes that are in web.php and in web.php file, and make sure that you test all of them in the APIs in order not to find any loopholes. We just closed our loopholes by adding this beautiful guard up there. With that, I think it is a great way to end this lecture, to end this the content of this third part of the course. You learned a lot throughout this course. I hope that it was instructive. I hope that you feel comfortable mainly with the framework. PHP, if you want to learn more about PHP, if you want to dig deeper into PHP, the documentation that is online is extremely helpful. W3 Schools can help you. The PHP documentation can help you. There are other courses, whether on Udemy or somewhere else, that could also help you significantly learn about PHP as a language. Calligraphy in itself is a subset of what PHP allows you to do, but calligraphy does things in an absolutely fantastic way. Now, calligraphy is open source, remember that. So, from the moment you start being more and more comfortable with it, you can make changes to it and change, the framework, the core of it, and make it do the things that are more appropriate to your application. Okay, with that, I wish you a fantastic day, and I hope to see you in our next and final lecture, which is going to be a wrap up about everything that we learned. Have a great day.